Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. As during all of the MLB trade deadline drama that was taking place on Tuesday afternoon, we also got the news that the Chicago Bears are signing wide receiver DJ Moore to a lucrative extension. The deal is 4 years for $110 million. It includes $82.6 million guaranteed. So, pretty substantial marks here for DJ Moore, who has definitely emerging as a franchise wide receiver. You know, he was sort of hovering on that top 10 receiver conversation. I think that's around where he is headed into this year. And he has a chance to, headed into the prime seasons of his career, end up really making a name for himself. This is a proactive move from the Bears, so a little bit surprising considering the fact that Moore just signed a new contract extension with the Panthers when he was with them. I believe it was in the 2022 offseason, or that's at least when that contract extension kicked in. And now he is locked in with Chicago through 2029. They sort of he almost jumped the line a little bit in terms of the different players that are going to be on expiring deals sooner than DJ Moore. But we saw from what the Bears put out last season that overall, I do think that when you look at the effect and the impact that DJ Moore had on the Chicago Bears last season, and not just on the Bears, but specifically on that quarterback position, it was Justin Fields. They went out, they traded for DJ Moore with the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft, and obviously, we're now looking at a new quarterback situation in Chicago with Caleb Williams. But even with DJ Moore present, Justin Fields was able to turn out the best season of his career up to this point. And now he is coming into a situation here with Caleb Williams where from day one, he should be able to help Caleb Williams establish himself in the league. The Bears have also been very proactive just in terms of trying to make sure that they get this quarterback conversation right. Head coach Matt Eberflus already knows that his job basically depends on the success of Caleb Williams. He's not going to survive a quarterback turnover for a second time, so he's trying to do everything he can to make this one count with Caleb Williams. He drafted Rome Odunze as well with the 9th overall pick, and it is a very talented offense surrounding Caleb Williams, specifically on the front of DJ Moore last year. He had 1,364 yards. He had 8 touchdowns. He had his highest catch rate of his career, pulled in over 70% of his targets, which was the best mark of his career. And he has been a just transformative player for Chicago in his brief time here. We have a comment here from Shots Below the Belt. Does this signing reflect confidence of the Chicago Bears heading into the season? Because they do also have Keenan Allen. That's an excellent point. I mentioned Rome Odunze, but it obviously doesn't stop there as well. The Bears have been adding a number of different receivers into the mix. They signed DeAndre Swift as well in the backfield, who is, somewhere around a top 10, 15 running back in the NFL. So I do think that the Bears are going to be, I think that it is a sign of confidence, and we have comments from Anthony as well. I'll get to your baseball question at the end of this segment. But Anthony does also say the one weakness that the Bears have is their offensive line, which is true. Definitely, it is the weaker part of their offense, but I do still feel like it's at least improved, that they have made some moves as of late. When you look at the difference in situations from when Justin Fields began his career in Chicago in 2021 to where the Bears are now, I mean, there's a number of far more impressive options around them. It's where they go out and they draft a Darnell Wright. They bring in Tevin Jenkins and I think that ultimately, it's definitely not an area of strength, I would say, that offensive line, but I do think that they have the chance at least to continue to develop, and at this point, just being league average, especially with all of those weapons that Caleb Williams is surrounded with. And Caleb Williams, for whatever it's worth as well, is a quarterback that has shown his ability to use his legs while he was at USC. Almost a little Justin Fields-ish in some degrees. One of the main criticisms of him does sort of also reflect one of the concerns with Justin Fields when he was in Chicago, and that's the idea of holding onto the ball too long. Now, Caleb Williams, when he was at college, I do feel like he also, at that point, especially in USC, in his final season, it was his junior year, but he sort of knew that he had to make these big-time plays and make the superstar types of plays because of the fact that the defense wasn't good. There wasn't quite as much necessarily as help in the receiving department as he used to have, but I think he is going to definitely be able to find his way in Chicago. And again, we'll get to the rest of the comments here in one moment, but just sort of wrapping up the idea on DJ Moore himself, I do think that this is very well spent money for Chicago, considering the fact that he is a player that at this point, and this may be a little bit unfair of me to say, but we haven't seen DJ Moore really have any issues in terms of run-ins with quarterbacks. It feels like he's been very drama-free, considering the fact that he's never won more than 7 games in his first 6 seasons of his career. That he has had some pretty bad quarterback play surrounding him for a number of these years, and the fact that he's sort of remained as cool as he has, and he's been extremely available, and durability is honestly one of the biggest things I'm looking to pay for when I'm in the NFL. He's got the talent, he's got the durability, it seems like he's going to have the leadership. Now, that will be put to the test maybe a little bit more now that there are so many other options around him. He was really the sole guy in Carolina for a number of those years. Now with Keenan Allen, who's coming off of underratedly a career season for Keenan Allen last year, and Rome Odunze, who I think eventually is going to, especially once Keenan Allen, he kind of feels like a one-year rental for me. They got him at an extremely low price that Odunze will be able to take over a much bigger role, but there are going to be a lot of mouths to feed. You just have to wonder about, eventually what that buy-in is going to look like. But I feel like everybody will sort of be on board after the kind of messy situations they've been at over the course of the past couple of years, that they'll be able to fortify themselves. I believe that they are minus money at this point to make the playoffs, and I'm sort of with that as well because I'm very high on what they have moving forward here. But Anthony Manzano comments, that's the one thing I feel like with Caleb Williams, he's a pocket passer like Aaron Rodgers that can move and use his feet, but he's a pocket passer. I agree. He definitely has that mobility to him, and it's a weapon. I almost look at the perfect modernized version, and by no means am I comparing him here, but Patrick Mahomes is kind of exactly what you're looking for, at least what I'm looking for in a quarterback, where you rely on the arm talent. That is your go-to weapon. But we've seen Mahomes a number of times throughout his career in these past few postseasons that he's able to create a run, pick up 20 yards on the ground when need be, on third downs, at least be a threat to scramble out. And that's what I feel like the best version of Caleb Williams could look like. Again, not saying he's Patrick Mahomes by any means, but that's sort of the archetype that you would like to see, and Aaron Rodgers does sort of fit in that same conversation as well, and that's something that I could conceivably see from Caleb Williams, is having the arm talent first, but also having the understanding of, not just being able to use his legs, but understanding when the right time is. And That's something where when you look at Justin Fields, he was basically in a point where he was reliant on his legs to some degree. And I liked what Justin Fields was able to put on the field in 2023. But ideally, yes, with, as Anthony also said, Justin would use his legs because pressure would break through a lot sooner than preferable. As soon as there was, any sense of pressure, Justin Fields, especially in that 2022 season, he was just taking off immediately. It's being able to keep your eyes downfield as you navigate, and that's a lot to ask of a quarterback, of course, but again, I do think that Caleb Williams has the tools to be able to do so. Shots Below the Belt says, having speed at wideout will help both the offensive line and quarterback. Great receivers means quicker throws. And I do think that's something that might take a little bit of adjustment for Caleb Williams, because a lot of the time we did see him sort of going for those home run plays. Just getting Caleb to understand, trusting the process, trusting the offense, and being able to make those quick decisions. I think that that's something that he might be a little bit bumpy out of the gates with, but I feel like, again, with all of the tools that he has, I'm a very high believer. I know that's not a hot take by any means, but I do feel like to some degree towards the end of his USC career, and as he was getting all of this buzz coming into the number 1 overall pick, people started trying to poke holes in Caleb Williams, but I do think that he has a chance to, live up to the expectations. Shot says, Justin Fields was sort of set up to fail. Totally agree there. He continues, the dude was running for his life, never had a running game, and half the time didn't even have an elite target. Didn't have that elite target until DJ Moore came in, which is why clearly the Bears were so set on trying to make sure that they did have a legitimate number 1 option. As much as we feel like Rome Odunze, at least personally, I feel like he is eventually going to be, one of those go-to wide receivers. Keenan Allen coming off of a career year, but we've seen this before with him in terms of the availability, and the injuries have definitely been big obstacles for him to overcome. So, I like the Keenan Allen pickup. Not to be, pessimistic or anything, but if he did end up getting hurt, I feel like it's good to just make sure that you have, Keenan Allen's almost a better number 2 option than he is a number 1, and you can definitely debate who's the better wide receiver fully healthy, DJ Moore or Keenan Allen, but DJ Moore, it's clear the Bears are investing into him as their true number 1 option. But we additionally saw it, it's not just Justin Fields, where absolutely, yes, his situation coming into the league was a bit of a disaster, but even if you go a little bit before, and listen, I was never a Mitchell Trubisky guy, but you saw during those years as well, Mitchell Trubisky, and that's when, at the same time, the Bears were bringing in Nick Foles as well. I think they had Andy Dalton at one point, trying to make them work. None of them were ever able to get comfortable in their situation because of the fact that the offensive line was a disaster. So at that point, Trubisky was almost their best opportunity because he was a little bit more mobile. Anthony says, coming from the perspective of a Dolphins fan, they over-relied on Tyreek and Jalen Waddle the last 2 seasons because of the offensive line and became one-dimensional. I do think that Mike McDaniel has, especially last year, we started to see the development of the run game as well, and some of the, improvements there. Going after Raheem Mostert, Devin Achane end up being, a speedster as well out of the backfield. But yeah, I do think that, it takes a couple adjustments as this goes on as well. And the run game is probably something that eventually that's going to be the next step for the Bears. But at the same time, the offensive line is going to need to get better. They kind of have a good number of running back options as well behind DeAndre Swift, where Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson are some pretty nice backup running backs as well. So they have a number of different looks that they could maybe, end up throwing out there, but the offensive line is going to need to hold up to even have that be a possibility. And then we will address the last comment here from Anthony. Hopefully, in terms of the Miami comparison, hopefully that doesn't happen with Chicago, where you're over-relying on the speed receivers to the point of using routes that cater to them when defenses can shut you down. I do think that eventually the Bears are going to be able to add a couple different layers here. Now, we'll obviously have to see there, especially with Caleb Williams in year one. They're probably going to have that base offense and just make sure that he's comfortable from day one. And then from there, I think you start to add on to the other parts of it. But I think that the Bears have done a very good job of rounding out their roster. Super quickly here, because I don't want to fully blow by it here, but at the beginning of the segment, Anthony did comment, do you agree with most of the major people who cover the MLB saying that the Marlins won the trade deadline when it comes to sellers? Again, I think I was a little bit, I do think that they came away with a ton of prospects, considering that they understood the situation that they were in. They decided that they weren't just going to stay in middle ground. They ended up pulling the trigger on these deals, and sure, it's been a lot of talent headed out those doors in Miami over the past handful of seasons, but especially with the way that the MLB is currently configured and the fact that it is a seller's market, that there were so many teams that felt like they were in a competitive stance that they could make a move. I do think the Marlins made out pretty well, and I would give them the overall tag of being a winner. But we're talking about the Bears and this DJ Moore contract. We are going to be going a little bit broader here. We do have some updates in terms of the Bears strategy for the Hall of Fame game, which is going to be taking place tomorrow night. So close on that NFL season. So we'll be touching on that, some of the other preseason updates as to who will and will not be playing in preseason, and some injuries and retirements that have taken place over the past 24 hours. So a whole lot of NFL training camp stories to break down. We will do all of that, but first a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.